You're sitting by the window at night, watching the city move. Lights flicker. People walk past in groups. Laughter drifts up from somewhere below, and you're just here, quiet, alone. Not miserable, not desperate, just alone. You scroll through your phone and see people tagging each other, making plans, celebrating things you weren't invited to. And somewhere in your chest, something tightens. Not quite loneliness, not quite indifference either, something in between. You don't have many friends, and part of you wonders if something is wrong with you. But what if the real reason is something most people never stop to notice? Here's what's quietly happening across the world right now. In 2023, the United States Surgeon General issued a formal advisory on loneliness, treating it not as a lifestyle preference, but as a public health crisis. Roughly 1 in 2 adults in America report feeling lonely on a regular basis, and the health consequences of prolonged social disconnection, researchers have found, are comparable in some studies to smoking. Not metaphorically, measurably. Think about that for a moment. We live in the most connected era in human history. Billions of people are reachable in seconds. Social media keeps us looped into hundreds of relationships at once. And yet, more people than ever feel like no one truly knows them. Connected, but alone. The feeds are full, the DMs are open, but the silence in the room is still deafening. So something isn't adding up. And if you've ever felt this, not just occasionally, but as a quiet constant in your life, the psychology behind it is more nuanced, more human, and more worth understanding than most people realize. Here's what the brain actually does with loneliness. Research has shown that when a person feels socially isolated, the brain processes that experience through some of the same neural pathways associated with physical pain. Loneliness doesn't just feel bad emotionally. The brain registers it as a threat, a genuine alarm signal. And when that alarm keeps going off, when chronic loneliness becomes the background noise of someone's life, the body responds by elevating cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Over time, a chronically elevated stress response begins to reshape how the brain approaches social situations. It becomes hypervigilant, guarded, risk-averse. In long-term studies conducted at Harvard, some spanning multiple decades, researchers observed that the quality of a person's close relationships was one of the strongest predictors of well-being across a lifetime. Not the number of relationships, not how popular someone appeared, the quality, the depth, the felt sense of being genuinely known. The brain, it turns out, isn't built for many. It's built for real. And that distinction matters more than almost anything else when we're trying to understand why some people simply don't move through the world with a wide circle around them. So not having friends doesn't always mean something is wrong with you. Sometimes it means your mind works differently. There are people who think in layers. You know the kind of conversation where someone asks how you're doing, and you genuinely want to answer not the surface version, but the real one. The version that involves what you've been sitting with lately, what's been shifting in you quietly, what you've been turning over in your mind at 2 a.m. And then you watch their eyes. You can tell within seconds whether they want that answer or whether they're already waiting for you to say, "Good, you?" For some people, the gap between the conversation they want to have and the conversation available to them is so wide, so consistent, that they eventually stop reaching. Not out of arrogance, not out of shyness, out of a kind of emotional efficiency. If depth is what you're hungry for and surface is what's being served, you stop pulling up a chair. This is what psychologists sometimes describe as a low tolerance for shallow interaction, and it's often rooted in how a person's mind naturally processes experience. Deep thinkers tend to engage internally before externally. They analyze. They sit with things. They find small talk not just boring, but genuinely overstimulating in its emptiness. It costs them more than it returns. And so the circle gets smaller. Not because the world rejected them, but because they quietly, almost unconsciously, stopped chasing connections that leave them feeling more alone than solitude does. There's another layer beneath this, and it's one of the most quietly exhausting experiences a person can carry. Some people are extraordinarily self-aware. They observe themselves constantly. They notice their own reactions, their own contradictions, their own emotional patterns. They know when they're performing and when they're not. They can feel the difference between showing up as themselves and showing up as whoever the room seems to need them to be. And when you have that kind of internal clarity, something happens in social settings. You start noticing the same thing in other people, the performance, the curated version, the smile that doesn't quite reach, the laugh that comes too quickly. You're not cynical, you're just accurate. But here's the part nobody tells you, that accuracy is exhausting to live with. When you can feel inauthenticity the way some people feel a change in weather, you start to protect your energy the same way someone with a chronic sensitivity protects their nervous system. You become selective, not because you don't want connection, because you've learned that connection without authenticity doesn't actually touch the loneliness. It decorates it. The nervous system has something to say here too. For certain people, and this is particularly true for those who identify as introverted or who process sensory and emotional information more intensely, social environments don't recharge, they drain. A gathering that feels effortless to one person can feel like running a marathon in another language to someone else. This is not a flaw, this is neurological. The nervous system of a highly sensitive or introverted person is simply operating on a different threshold. More input, more processing, more recovery time needed after. What this means, practically, is that the brain begins to associate large or frequent social engagement with depletion. And to protect the person, it starts pulling back, canceling plans, preferring a quiet night, feeling relief, real, physical relief when something gets called off. To the outside world, this looks like antisocial behavior. To the nervous system, it's maintenance. It's not withdrawal, it's recalibration. Introversion is not social failure. It's a different way of being human. And this is where it gets interesting. As people move through different seasons of life, early adulthood, the middle years, the quieter stretch that follows the meaning they assign to their solitude shifts. What felt like rejection at 20 feels more like discernment at 35. What felt like loneliness at one phase begins to feel like intentional stillness at another. The behavior doesn't always change. The interpretation does. The person who sat alone at lunch at 17 and felt ashamed of it may be the same person at 40 who turns down dinner invitations without guilt, who chooses one long conversation over a dozen shallow ones, who has stopped measuring the richness of their life in attendance. The brain learns. It recalibrates what it needs. And for people who have always been wired toward depth over breadth, that evolution often looks like peace. Hard-won, quiet, real peace. At its core, this is about emotional safety. The people who move through the world with small circles, who choose solitude over performance, who have high standards for where they invest their emotional energy, they have almost always learned something. Usually through experience, sometimes through pain. They've learned that certain environments cost more than they give, that certain relationships require them to shrink, that being around the wrong people doesn't feel neutral, it feels like disappearing. And so solitude becomes something like a familiar room. Not perfect, not always warm, but safe, predictable, theirs. It's not armor against connection, it's a return to themselves. The place where they don't have to perform, translate, or compress who they are into something more socially convenient. That kind of solitude isn't emptiness, it's restoration. So, if you've made it here, still watching, still listening, maybe something in this felt familiar. Maybe you've spent years wondering quietly what was wrong with you, why it never felt as easy as it seemed to look for everyone else, why you could be in a full room and feel completely invisible. Maybe you're not alone because no one chose you. Maybe you're alone because you stopped choosing the wrong people. And maybe that's not a tragedy. Maybe that's the beginning of understanding something true about yourself, that you were never built for performance. You were built for presence, for depth, for the kind of connection that actually holds. That kind of connection is rarer. It takes longer to find. But it's the only kind that doesn't leave you feeling hollowed out afterward. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are not missing something everyone else has figured out. You are simply someone who knows the difference between being surrounded and being seen. And knowing that difference, really knowing it, that's not a flaw. That might be one of the rarest things a person can carry.